Blog Talk Radio.
The fact of the matter is that the IRS has to operate with absolute integrity. The government generally has to conduct itself in a way that is true to the public trust. That's especially true for the IRS. So here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to hold the responsible parties accountable. Yesterday, I directed Secretary Lew to follow up on the IG audit to see how this happened and who is responsible and to make sure that we understand all the facts. Today, Secretary Lew took the first step by requesting and accepting the resignation of the acting commissioner of the IRS. Because given the controversy surrounding this audit, it's important to institute new leadership that can help restore confidence going forward. Second, we're going to put in place new safeguards to make sure this kind of behavior cannot happen again. And I've directed Secretary Lew to ensure the IRS begins implementing the IG's recommendations right away. Third, we will work with Congress as it performs its oversight role. And our administration has to make sure that we are working hand in hand with Congress to get this thing fixed. Congress, Democrats and Republicans, owe it to the American people to treat that authority with the responsibility it deserves and in a way that doesn't smack of politics or partisan agendas. Because I think one thing that you've seen is across the board, everybody believes what happened as reported in the IG report is an outrage. The good news is it's fixable, and it's in everyone's best interest to work together to fix it. I'll do everything in my power to make sure nothing like this happens again. By holding the responsible parties accountable, by putting in place new checks and new safeguards, and going forward by making sure that the law is applied as it should be, in a fair and impartial way. And we're going to have to make sure that the laws are clear so that we can have confidence that they are enforced in a fair and impartial way, and that there's not too much ambiguity surrounding these laws. So that's what I expect, that's what the American people deserve, and that's what we're going to do. Thank you very much.
Mr. Simpson has his day in court is the title of our episode. You just heard from President Obama on the IRS and the targeting of certain political groups. Now, there's a long list of political groups and individuals that claim they've been targeted by the IRS division out of Cincinnati, Ohio. Now, keep in mind, as President Obama said, that this is a tax matter, and Congress itself authorized the 503C, I believe it's D, issue, and then it went through something called rulemaking. That's where it is printed in the Federal Register, and of course now online, and goes through various decision-making processes. Nonetheless, the particular statute itself is set out and then subject to interpretation. To make the story, as they say, concise as one can, an organization, a group of people, obviously have a name, Tea Party for America, or Greens United, Reds for a Better Country, etc., decide that they want to apply for a tax-exempt status for educational purposes. Well, they fill out the necessary paperwork, and nowadays, unlike when I was more active in following those types of organizations dealing not-for-profits, etc., there's a number of filing fees that have to go forward. And of course, they scrutinize the organization. They want to know your objectives, etc., samples of your literature, your membership base, or your target membership base, and what have you. All the information was always sent to them, and they can decide whether or not you are in the education business or you in the direct political business. Now, the NAACP is a very good example. It's an education organization, and then it has the fund, which is into litigation. So there's several different tax options there for the NAACP. And many times the organization will have that the Brookings Institute, etc., Heritage Foundation is an educational type organization, and of course you have things like the Red Cross, etc., that are philanthropic. But again, all of these things get tax exemption. I can recall in the Reagan administration for the first time, the whole idea of charitable contributions, etc., almost disappeared. That was part of what we call tax reform. And also under the first President Bush, they were curtailed. Now, for many charitable organizations, if you give, say, $1,000, you get credit for about $50. About $500, 50% there, and it's up to a point that you can do this. Now, under Citizens United, it was definitely enhanced. There's no doubt about it. So where we are now, the acting director is out. The former director who was appointed by D.W. Bush, there are only two appointments there. There is the council, I believe, and the director are political appointments. And they are appointed, I believe, for 5 years. At least the director is. So then they had an acting director there. And, of course, there's 100,000 workers involved with the IRS in various divisions scattered throughout the U.S. But Cincinnati is one big one. That's the one that deals with the tax-exempt status. Then there's groups in around D.C. and in Kansas City and various other places that you deal with them. And, of course, we've seen audits from some of those before. But nonetheless, and also states have various organizations that oversee non-profit type giving. Now, not as all of it is charitable, some of it is educational, etc. But the primary responsibility goes to the federal government for certifying a not-for-profit, depending on if they're under CD or whatever they're under as an organization. And that has to be understood. But it is in this sort of hemispherical type cluster, we'll call it, that we have the IRS situation and the thing of leaks. And we said last night, leaks, Bradley Manning's in jail for weeks. Mr. Assad is pinned up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And Ms. Stewart, defense attorney Lynn Stewart, is in jail in Fort Worth area, their medical facility, for basically giving a press conference, I suppose you'd say, leaking of her client's information. And, of course, the WikiLeaks was the big leak. But these reporters had evidently interviewed people, as the AP types, that had given out some quote-unquote secrets, and the administration was trying to find out as to whom they were dealing with. And that's quite common. It's just usually that it's not known to the public. Now, there is a way, obviously, of doing that. If you recall, Judith Miller, an absolute fabricator that worked there for the New York Times, she actually went to jail and stayed in jail under a contempt order and was finally freed, and she gave up some information. So journalists in the U.S. have went to jail. Journalists in many countries go to jail. But the difference primarily here is Judith Miller and the AP to a less extent, but the AP is a wire service. They work for the 1%. And you look to these various conglomerates, the Koch brothers wanting to get the Tribune and the LA Times. The New York Times owns the Boston Globe. And the Gannett operation has USA Today and various local newspapers that stretch all over the map, quite literally. I know we were covering something out of Jackson, Mississippi, and that's a Gannett newspaper there. So we run into Gannett newspapers all over the place. And their online editions used to be pretty much unrestricted for what they put online. Now most of them went to a subscription model, and then you get to people like the Fox News and various other network operations. During the Watergate, for those of us who can recall that, and we'll tie all this into Mr. Simpson's day in court. Basically there you had the Washington Post and to a lesser extent the New York Times, and the rest of it was ferried by the watch services when Bernstein and Company were doing their quote-unquote magic. They're reporting Deep Throat and this whole cast of characters. But primarily it was a governmental story about the Nixon administration. They had tapes there and about what happened in the campaign, the plumbers breaking into Daniel Ellsberg incident is a defender of one Bradley Manning. We have him on Twitter. Very important decision there. But Nixon's went far beyond that. It was a rogue operation to get a certain thing done. Now, of course, he used the IRS too, but that was commonly done in those days. It was also very common, going back various administrations, to use the FBI under Hoover. And, of course, Hoover kept files to curry favor. So therefore, he was the director for almost 50 years of the FBI, and then, of course, has been a succession of directors there. But basically, you see that. And there was also the release of Benghazi emails now. You notice they're not memoranda anymore. Various government agencies wanting to get their take on this situation. But Benghazi is an issue that's ongoing. It is more insecure today than it was before. So is Tripoli. And it has to be cast in that particular light. However, though, the Republicans have tried to blow it up as the IRS situation to get it to Obamacare because they are applying the tax, which has nothing to do with that division. But the basic engine behind this is the monopoly media. And we noticed between with the trial of the century, you had all these various outfits. You didn't have social media to the point today, but the internet did in fact come in. The trial was broadcast live throughout the world if you could get on the satellite to get it, and it was widely discussed. Remember the OJ group, we were around there, and the widely debated, and every day new evidence would come out. The trial started, the actual event was in 94. Trial started in 95 and went to September. OJ was liberated and returned to Rockingham. But OJ was in court today, and you'll hear from that. It'll be most of our broadcast, telling his side of the story, what happened to him, trying to get back some of his collectibles. Now, the problem there was, from the very inception, he was advised by his attorney, Galater. He's a Florida attorney, and yesterday, Grasso was on the stand. That was a local Vegas man, a Nevada attorney. You have to have an attorney if you're not licensed in that particular state to be there. Nonetheless, they went through this, and the whole argument was about what the case was going to be framed as. Was OJ out just to get his valuables? That was the frame of the case. He'd also been drinking all day. Did that come in? Didn't come in. There was evidently a plea attempt, 30 months from Roger, the former DA. OJ says he was never informed of that, and Galater said he was not interested in that. But yet, all the quote-unquote baggage from the first trial, the trial of the century, was there, and that is what confronted the defense in that, and they had a hostile judge to begin with, that later went on to reality TV named Glass. The trial so far has went as well as possible for the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson. But again, it's very, very difficult to get a favorable verdict on ineffective counsel or ineffective representative, unless that counsel is literally asleep at the wheel, has committed various offenses. Now, there was a problem here. This fellow got over $500,000 in legal fees, and he did not hire expert witnesses. Now, that would also be looked at, and there's evidently some problems here with him. He'll be there, I believe, Galanta, on Friday. Yeah. So, as to what his testimony is, and he was making available some emails to the state. The state has its attorneys and also. But nonetheless,